Hey guys, welcome back to Learn Python the Hard Way. Today we're going to focus on exercise 31 of the Learn Python the Hard Way book, and we're going to dive deeper into making decisions and working with if conditions. As always, you can find the link to the current exercise, to the current chapter of the book, in the description below. Please note that this is part of the paid section of the book, so you would either need to purchase the book or alternatively, of course, feel free to simply follow along with the video. So far we worked with if, elif, and else conditions, and we used them to print out different print statements. Now we're gonna go one step further, and we're gonna actually build a little program here to make decisions and to have a little game. So to get started, let's create a new Python file. And for that, we can open our terminal, navigate to the correct folder, and then type out code for Visual Studio Code, or for example Atom, if that's a text editor you're using, followed by the name of the exercise or the Python file. So in this case, code exercise31.py. And we're going to start out our game by actually printing out using triple quotation marks. You enter a dark room with two doors. Do you go through door 1 or door number 2? Next, we're going to create a variable called door, and we are going to use the input function to get some input using this prompt here, this greater than sign, to actually collect some input. Now, if the user here chooses door number 1, so if he types in 1, then we're going to print out there's a giant bear here eating a cheesecake. Next we print out what do you do? And then we offer two different options. First of all, to take the cake, which we just print out. And then second, scream at the bear. Now let's collect the input again from the user, and we're going to store that in a variable called bear. Now if that value is 1, then we're going to print out the bear eats your face off. Good job, so that was the wrong choice. Alternatively, if a user chooses number 2, it's also not so good. We print out the bear eats your legs off. And finally, we're using printf here to render the variable we entered, so which is neither 1 or 2. Saying that was a better choice. Print bear runs away. And here there are two equal signs. Alright, so if instead the user selected door number 2, let's just make sure that this is properly aligned. This. And then we're going to print out you stare into the endless abyss Cthulhu's retina. And we print out 1 blueberries, so we have another choice here, or number 2 yellow jacket clothespins. And we have a third choice, 3 understanding revolvers yelling melodies. So let's get an input here from the user out of those choices. So we pass in again input, and if the user selects 1 as the input, or if the user selects 2 as the input, then we're going to print out your body survives powered by a mind of Jello. And good job. Else, if the user enters anything else, for example 3 or another input, we're going to print out the insanity rots your eyes into a pool of marks. So it doesn't sound so good. And finally, if the user chose neither 1 nor 2 for the door, we're going to print out you stumble around and fall on a knife and die. So it's not very good prospects here. Alright, let's save this. And now we have basically different if conditions, elif and else conditions nested inside. We have the different branches here. So first of all, we have the choice of which door to pick. For example, 1, 2 or something else. And if we pick any of those doors, for example 1 or 2, then we have sort of a second layer where we can collect another input for bear, for example. And then we have nested inside of this branch of the if statement another if condition, if, elif, else, and based on that we're going to print out different answers. And that's quite powerful that we can nest those if conditions inside of each other's so that we can have different decision branches basically. Alright, let's go ahead and let's actually save and then run our code. So if we say we type in Python 3 and then followed by the name of the Python file, we can now first of all choose which door to pick. So if we pick number 1, for example, then we are in this first branch of our conditional statement, and we have the choice to pick 2 options here. So that's basically what we see here. It's a giant bear eating a cheesecake. What do you do? Take the cake or scream at the bear. So if we type number 2, then we get the answer, the bear eats your legs off. Good job. So that's basically how we can work through this and have different conditions. Let's take a look at the study drills here. The first one is to make a new part of the game and change what decisions people can make. Expand the game out as much as you can before it gets ridiculous. So what we could do, for example, is we have a third door. So we can say here, door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3. So we have the input here, and then instead of just having the condition with door 1, 2, and else, we can have another elif condition. So if that is equal to 3, we could, for example, say, good choice. Now pick a price. And then we could, for example, have 2 different prices. For example, gold coins or a treasure chest. And depending on what the user chooses, we're going to store that in a variable called input. And now we're going to nest another if condition in here. So if price is equal to 1, then we say you get, for example, 1,000 gold coins. Great job. Alternatively, if the user picks number 2, So this was number 1 here. Can then say you get a treasure chest which is filled with diamonds. Amazing, for example. And then of course we should also cover the else condition. If the user enters anything else apart from 1 and 2, we could print out it's a trap, you die. Let's see if that works. So if we save this and go back to our terminal, we can run our code again. So here we can now choose between door 1, 2 and 3. Let's choose door number 3. And now we have our choice here, so we can choose between the gold coins and the treasure chest. Let's choose the gold coins and we get back, you get 1,000 gold coins, great job. Alright. And then we could also go ahead and in a similar way create a completely new game from scratch with all the various inputs just in a very similar way like this one. And of course we could also nest those conditions even deeper inside of each other, so that for example we not only have 2 levels with the door and the bear here, for example, but if someone chooses any of those choices here, then of course we could have a deeper level, the 3rd level, for example, where we could make another choice and based on that provide some output. Finally, let's take a look at some of the common student questions. So the first one is, can you replace elif with a subsequent if-else combination? So instead of using elif here, can we go ahead and say something like this? Else, and then for example this, if door number 2 instead of that. So that's possible in some situation, but it depends on how each if-else condition is written. It also means that Python will check every if-else combination rather than just the first false one, like it would with if, elif, else. Try to make some of these to figure out the differences. So what would happen here is if we have, instead of elif, we have else and then some other if condition. So we would have an else branch here, and then we would have those if conditions. Then if the first condition is not correct, we're going to switch over to the else branch. But then again, if we have those different if branches, for example, not just the one here, but maybe 2 other if conditions, then it would check all of these one after another and make a decision based on that. So it can be quite useful to have elif as a shorthand form, sort of, because then we can check if this condition is matched here, and we don't have to basically take a look at the else condition and then again go through all the other if statements, but we can just check elif and then go through that. So it can save quite a bit of time, and it can be a little bit cleaner because we don't have to have another indentation level with the different if conditions if the first one is not true, but we can basically capture that using elif. Next, how do I tell whether a number is between a range of numbers? So for example, if the user has the choices 1 through 5, for example, and we want to check if that's within those choices, then do this. If it's outside of that range, then do something else. And here we have 2 separate options. We can either do 0 smaller than the variable, for example, smaller than x, smaller than 10, or we can say 1 smaller than or equals to x, which is basically the same as this one here, except that we explicitly say this should include the number 1 in here, while this is basically just saying it has to be larger than 0 and smaller than 10. This is a classic notation, or we use x in range and then we specify the range, for example 1 to 10. And that basically means in the range here, the lower bound would be inclusive, so that would be included, while the upper bound 10 would be exclusive. We can also see that if we compare that here to this condition, so it's smaller than or equals to x, so 1 is smaller than or equals to x, and x is smaller than 10. So 10 is exclusive. It's basically the range all the way from 1 up till 9. What happens if I wanted more options in the if, elif, else blocks? add more elif blocks for each possible choice. So that's what we did before. We basically added another elif condition here by adding a third door, and then we could add what should happen if that choice is selected. So we can add as many elif branches to our if statement as we'd like. So that's it for exercise 31, and see you guys in the next video with exercise 32.